Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindy Chavez here. Today is, what is today? Today's Wednesday. Oh my goodness. October the 24th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Your first daily dose of happy for the day, and we hope that you're off to a great start. We are off to a great start ourselves. Cindy, how you doing? Have you had any amazing things happening or insights happening in the last 24 hours since we talked?
Always. Yeah. Yesterday's podcast was very good. And just some of the things that we discussed, I kept thinking about, when we were talking at the very end of the podcast, it's kind of where we'll start today, but we were talking about lucid dreaming.
Right.
And I don't know if I said this to you or to the phone call I had afterwards, or if we said it on the air, but I thought it was worth noting. And that is the idea that people that have lucid dreams will say that lucid dreams feel more real than reality. And that just sounds ridiculous. Like, how can it feel more real? And I've said it myself, and I've only had a lucid dream maybe less than a dozen times. I kind of really have to work at it, and I have stopped putting so much focus, but the whole conversation made me want to go back and start cultivating lucid dreams again. But during the time that I did have some of them, that's the way I felt. They were so real. They felt more real than my regular waking life. Well, I started thinking about what we heard Joe Dispenza say about meditation, certain types of meditation. And he asked his interviewer, can you imagine if your sight was about 25% better, if your sense of touch was about 25% heightened, if your sense of smell, if all your senses were heightened? And I thought, maybe that's it. That's it. In a lucid dream, I think your senses are heightened. And so everything seems more real.
Well, I'd like that, if for no other reason than I've never been really good at visualizing. I've never had really clear images either in deliberate visualizing or dreaming or whatever. So any percentage better would be an improvement as far as I'm concerned. And to actually enhance the experience, that'd be fabulous. I'd love that.
Yeah. So I had that discussion with another really fabulous law of attraction creator coach that I'm friends with, and we had a call yesterday just to catch up with each other. And so she really likes Neville as well. So we had a great discussion about that. So that felt really good. Things are feeling really good. The vibe is really high over here.
That's good.
And I always attribute at least part of it to Neville, because that's the recognition I had maybe 2 weeks ago. Over the past 10 years, I've been studying Neville, but there's probably been gaps of a year or more at times when I go on to something else, and then I pick Neville up again. I'm always reading something, but it's not like I've continually been reading Neville. And it hit me a week or so ago that every time things really start happening in my life, big things manifesting, it hit me that there's a correlation with Neville, that it's always in a time when I'm really, really studying and reading Neville. And I thought,
Yeah, well, I think the same thing happens with any of the major gurus, with Abraham especially, and you mentioned Joe Dispenza, and there's so many out there. Anytime that I find that I'm reading something, it inevitably gives me some kind of little boost, right? And that boost produces results. I never know exactly what they're going to be before they happen, but yeah, it always produces results, and that's a good thing.
That's the thing with me is we talked about this before, like the Peanuts cartoon, Charlie Brown and Lucy. Yeah. Pigpen, the character Pigpen.
Yeah.
Everywhere he goes, there's like a little cloud of dirt around him. Well, I'm like the Pigpen of words and books, because everywhere I go, there's a cloud of books that follows me around. Like, literally, it's awful. Like, I look anywhere I've been for any given time, like 10 minutes, there's a stack of books there. So I'm always reading. And now I'm realizing it's kind of like, we're always eating, right? Most of us eat every day. And then one day you say, oh, every time I eat that thing, I have a reaction of some kind or whatever. And it's like you've been having this reaction or whatever for years. And finally one day you put it together. Oh, the headaches come from that. Oh my goodness. Or the rash or whatever. It's like sometimes it takes a while to catch up, and then you realize that there's a pattern. I mean, I deal with patterns in with coaching all the time, right? I'm always
Sure.
telling people, I had somebody tell me last week, oh no, I've recognized this terrible pattern. I was like, no, this is the good day for you. Like, you want to recognize the pattern.
Hooray!
And sometimes it's a good pattern. And that's what I
Yeah, sure.
recognize. Like, every time I'm really deep into studying Neville, wheels start turning, things start happening over here. So,
Well, I can actually feed that a little bit because I hadn't even made a connection until just now. But yesterday, Louise and I got some really good news with her gardening business. As you know, we've had a good year, but personally, our financial situation within the business hasn't been as good as it should have been for a variety of reasons. And yesterday, we got word from the company that provides our workers' compensation insurance that we were getting every year we get audited. That's just part of what you do, and this year's audit resulted in a $3,500 refund to us. So we got an unexpected $3,500, which is really very useful right now.
Ooh, that's a story that I tell sometimes when people are feeling a little hopeless or frantic or worried about the hows. We talk about this a lot. Even in that story we read yesterday, the first thing the person said, okay, I got clear about what I wanted. Now, how's it going to happen? And I remember one time I got a check in the mail from the insurance company for, I don't know, it was under $10,000, but I want to think it was close, like $9,200 or something. And it was said, oh, you've been overpaying X amount on your homeowner's insurance for, 15 years or something. I mean, it just added up, and here was this big check. So I always say to people, like, I had no idea that check was coming.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes things can come in ways we just do not expect, right? So,
and what was really good about that $3,500 that showed up yesterday was how much of a sense of relief it provided.
Yes. Yeah.
I think the relief was actually more important than the money was, believe it or not. Because, if you're relieving, right, if you're feeling relief, it means you just lowered your resistance level. So now, not just 3,500, but everything's going to start coming better just because of that. So.
Yes. No, absolutely. You got it. That's it. And I like to imagine times. I tell that story about the time that I opened Facebook when I was on the other side of the world. I opened Facebook and someone says, does anyone know the name of the cyclist who was hit, on River Road this morning? And that was where my son, who was a pro cyclist, used to train every day. And I was like frantic. And then I found, called and called everywhere. And then I found out it wasn't him and that the guy had been taken to the hospital and was going to make it. So, and I felt such a sense of relief.
Yeah.
And I sometimes want to memorize that feeling of relief so that when I need it, I can go tap into it, because that's what we're looking for a lot of the time. Yes. I don't know where it is on the emotional scale. Did you look it up and see where it was on the emotional?
That's a good idea. Where's my copy of the book?
I'm having a deja vu. I think we had this discussion like months ago and looked it up, and I'm not sure it's there.
Well, I think we were like, there's no actual relief. No, there's no relief on the scale. Passion, enthusiasm. No, relief isn't on here, which is strange.
Definitely, yeah.
I mean, when you consider that Abraham makes a big deal about getting relief, you would think it would be on here, but well.
Well, congratulations. I am so happy to hear that good report.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yesterday was actually
really good.
We had a few things that happened that went really well yesterday, and it was just relief that. I mean, at one point, Louise was in the living room. I was in the kitchen, but we can see each other through a see-through section in the wall there, and we're both just going.
It's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful feeling to feel that relief. So, have you been? I'm curious because we're kind of connecting this to the study we've been doing, and things we've been reading. Have you been using any specific practice, in the past couple of weeks that you weren't using before, or can you attribute this little windfall to,
I'm not sure I can connect the dots that carefully.
Okay.
But I can tell you that I have been much more mindful of your favorite Neville phrase, assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
Yep.
And I've been one of my favorite times. I'm not your typical meditator. I'm not the kind of person who sits down for 10 to 30 minutes and just does meditation and all that. It drives me nuts to do that. It literally does. So I have to do other kinds of things than that. And one of my favorite ways is if I wake up in the middle of the night, I'll treat that as a meditation opportunity. So I'll just lie there in bed and I'll just focus on, whatever it is I want to focus on to meditate
Right.
and just relax my mind and so forth. And in the midst of that, I will often do things like, okay, Neville Goddard, he says, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. So what's my wish? Okay, well, I want, 10,000 listeners listening to every episode of the podcast. So what does that feel like to me? Well, it feels like, hooray, we finally got there. I try not to sit up in bed to actually go, hooray. I'm doing it in my mind.
You don't want to wake Louise up.
No, that wouldn't be good. No. She would say, what on earth are you doing?
You're over there, woohoo! Yeah.
It's 3 o'clock in the morning.
I do the same thing. If I wake in the night, I use it as an opportunity to meditate and to focus.
Mm.
And it's a great thing to do because you're already hopefully somewhat more relaxed than you would be in your daytime life running around doing whatever.
Exactly.
And then also most of us, can give ourselves permission to relax because it's 3 a.m. and we're in bed and
it's okay to relax. If you fall asleep while you're doing it, that's okay.
It's okay.
No, it's true. It is a good time to do it for exactly that reason. In fact, that's what got me thinking about doing that. Because you know how it is, you wake up in the middle of the night and sometimes it's like your eyes are going boing, they're wide awake and so forth. Yeah. And you're like, no, I need to go to sleep. I need to get sleep right now. So that's what got me started trying to do meditation. I figured, well, sometimes I fall asleep when I try to do meditation sitting up. Why not try it while I'm lying down in bed? Right.
It's perfect. It's the perfect opportunity.
It is. Yeah, it really is.
No worries about it. Well, while I'm looking at the clock and wondering if you want to do some promos before we dive into Neville.
We should probably do that, shouldn't we? Yes. So first of all, we want to say hello to our friends in the Law of Attraction Changed My Life group on Facebook, who we're live streaming this to, and invite you as well as our listeners listening in through the podcast or normal podcast type channels to, if you're not yet a subscriber, become a subscriber. Because it's really easy to do. You just go to, depending on what kind of device you have, iPhones, you do it obviously through either iTunes or through the podcast app. Android, a little more complex. You got to make sure you have some kind of podcast app installed. But we've made it as simple as possible. You'll find on our homepage and also in the Facebook group, I also posted links there, links for each kind of device, and it'll just walk you right through the process of subscribing to the podcast. And that way you get all of the episodes that we're doing every single week, streaming right to your phone every single day. So take advantage, become a subscriber. We're aiming to get us up to 10,000 listeners per episode. Right now we're in the 200, 250 range, which is about double where we were 3 to 4 months ago. So we're making good progress, but we got a ways to go. So we need your help to get there. And we want to reach out and have so many people getting that daily dose of happy, because as I found out yesterday, particularly with my newest co-hosts, Carlos and Alex, I mean, we were just laughing up a storm. And you saw it yesterday, but we were just laughing up a storm.
Yeah, I did peek in, and I was laughing as well.
Oh, geez. I mean, it was so much fun. And I just imagine what happens when we have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands being a part of that and just adding that to their daily routine, because, God almighty, we would end up with a planet of very happy, very attracting people. And I can only begin to imagine what that's like. So please do become a subscriber and also share the message. Put it out there on social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever it is you use, Twitter. Just put out stuff about how you're listening to loatoday.net, and that helps to share the information with everybody else, including people that you don't even know. That's both social media algorithm and law of attraction algorithm. Did you know that law of attraction had an algorithm, Cindy?
It does.
It really does.
It's vibration. Well,
it's what it is.
I think it's interesting. We've talked about this before, but many things that I've found that I'm really grateful that I've found in not just media, but sure, books, movies, podcasts, but products, techniques, methods, all kinds of things that I've found that I use, that I enjoy in my life. I found because somebody somewhere on social media said, I just read this book. Hey, I'm listening to LOA today. Hey, try this recipe. Hey, this movie's great. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so I'm thankful for people that will share the knowledge about something they enjoy. So yeah, thank you for sharing. And
Absolutely. We appreciate all of you. And we also appreciate the emails and contact messages and so forth. I mean, we had a really good one yesterday, and there have been a bunch of them we've been getting lately. It's so heartwarming to us to know that we're doing all this. I mean, it does take some work to get it done. We love what we're doing, but it does take some work. And to know that it's being appreciated is just wonderful. So keep the, as they used to say back in television days, keep those cards and letters coming in because they really do help.
That's funny that you said that. That's true. I forgot about that phrase. We used to hear that a lot.
Right,
and
exactly.
Now everything's usually email.
It's emails and text messages, but it's the same thing, really.
Yeah, it's so true. It's just connection. And there's that idea that, for every one person that sends you a letter or say an email, there's 100 people that think about it but don't do it, or they think the things that are received. In other words, they have feedback to give you of some kind, hopefully good, but hey, we can take it. If there's something you'd like to see us say, or you'd like us to bring up that we haven't brought up, let us know that too. We're open to that. But it's like, for every one person that connects with you, there's 100 people that don't. And I'm always like, go ahead, connect, say hello, give us a wave, send us an email. Yesterday, I got several emails from people that were giving me, feedback, saying, somebody wrote to me and said, I listen to the podcast every day, so I already feel like I know you and trust you.
Aww.
And, appreciate your ability to coach me. And, I thought, wow, that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then we did get that wonderful email. I just love it when people say they appreciate Neville.
Oh, yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Can you imagine what would have happened with Neville if Neville had been alive and doing his stuff during the era of social media?
Like just 20 years later,
I mean, holy cow.
He died in the 70s. So it's like, just 1990. Just 20 years later.
He'd be a rock star today.
Yeah. I mean, I think he was already, and he didn't even have social media.
In limited circles, but he was, no doubt.
Yeah. You're right. That would have been really something. Well, in a parallel universe, he's still going, I
guess.
That's
right. Exactly. In a parallel universe.
And we are keeping him alive and his teachings alive by reading his writings and listening to his lectures and learning what we can from him. So I'm very appreciative of him and my Neville decoder ring.
Yes, I'm appreciative of your Neville decoder ring as well, because you helped me make sense out of some of this stuff.
Here's how you get a Neville decoder ring: is you read everything that Neville has written 4 times, and on that 4th time,
click.
And here's why you get it: because the whole time you're reading over and over, you're wishing you could understand it better. And then one day, the 4th time through, you assume the feeling of the decoder ring appears.
I love it. That's great. Well, it's especially useful considering when we got up today and logged on, because we've been checking the book out online. Is a nice, easy way to do it. We found that the websites that were displaying Neville were gone. It's like, oh my God, where did they go? Right?
I said, oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I have this other one that I use. I'll go to that one. I go to that one. It's gone too. Like,
right?
No. So I had to find another one. There's plenty of Neville all over the internet.
There is.
If you are a Neville fan, or if you're somebody who wants to discover Neville for yourself, Neville's writings are pretty easy to find. And so
I also included a link to the PDF that I found for this morning in the description, both in the Facebook group and for the show. So you can just click a link there and that'll take you to the PDF. Yeah.
Well, yesterday we almost finished up with chapter 3. So we're towards the end of chapter 3. And he actually is talking about dreaming, actual dreamings, like nighttime dreams, and how if we could learn, because he's been talking prior to this about what he calls the larger dimensional space, or the 4th dimension, which is that place we tap into when we're imagining. When we close our eyes and begin to meditate, and we start imagining the scene that we want to have happen. That's the space that he's talking about. And so he likens it also to the same space we inhabit when we're having a nighttime dream. And in a nighttime dream, most of us have absolutely no control over what's going on in the dream. We fall asleep and that dream happens. What he describes here is sounds a lot like lucid dreaming. Well, I think it's exactly what he's talking about. And so that's where we ended up yesterday at the end of the podcast.
Right.
We were talking about lucid dreaming. And in a lucid dream, you are aware that you are dreaming and you are conscious, but you are still dreaming. And so you have control in the dream. And it's a lot of fun because if you want to, you can do anything because you don't really have limitations because you're dreaming. So if you want to fly or, jump over a building or maybe have a conversation with someone that you haven't been able to have a conversation with in real life, or there's all kinds of things you can do. And people use lucid dreams to consciously create their waking reality. So he's talking a little bit about that here. He just touches on it. It's not a big lucid dreaming class or anything, but he does talk about it. In my experience, and there are many, many great books on lucid dreaming, for me, lucid dreaming was something I really had to cultivate and work on. It didn't just happen because I decided I wanted to. I went to bed every night for probably months with the intention of having a lucid dream, and it took a while. And so, but he is talking about just the concept of controlling our mind. Because think about it, all of these exercises we've been talking about that deal with creating a small scene and then imagining it. It's all in the purpose of controlling what our thought processes are doing. It's the reason why he says to choose a small, construct a small scene and then imagine it over and over. Because if it's too big, our mind wanders, and the mind wandering off into areas that aren't serving us is what we want to avoid.
Yeah, right.
Right. And so he's likening just the control in a lucid dream, or the control in our waking thoughts. What he calls a waking dream is the imagination. Mm-hmm. So we'll start there. He says, and because that greater world is slowly passing through our three-dimensional world, we can, by the power of imagination, mold our world in harmony with our desire. Look as though you saw, listen as though you heard, stretch forth your imaginary hand as though you touched, and your assumptions will harden into facts. To those who believe that a true judgment must conform to the external reality to which it relates, this will be foolishness and a stumbling block. But I preach and practice the fixing in consciousness of that which man desires to realize. Experience convinces me that fixed attitudes of mind which do not conform to the external reality to which they relate, and are therefore called imaginary, things which are not, will nevertheless bring to naught things that are. So he's saying if we fix our attitude of mind on a certain thing, even though everyone around us may say that's not the way it is, we will bring those things to pass if we will continually focus there. Not unlike what Abraham says.
It's an interesting phrasing he uses here too in the book. Experience convinces me. He says, let's see where is it? Experience convinces me that fixed attitudes of mind which do not conform to the external reality to which they relate and are therefore called imaginary, things which are not, will nevertheless bring to naught things that are. That's an interesting phrase. Bring to naught things that are. I mean, it sounds like he's saying it'll replace what is. So what you imagine replaces what is. But Woof, that's where the decoder ring is helpful.
Yeah, well, that's he's grabbing a half of or a quarter of a verse out of New Testament scripture
Oh,
there.
is that where it comes from?
So
Oh, okay.
suddenly it's like, okay, we're back. If you read Neville, you'll soon realize that he uses a lot of New Testament Bible verses, and sometimes, most of the time, very much out of context to what we have, been taught. He says, "I do not wish to write a book of wonders, but rather to turn man's mind back to the one and only reality that the ancient teachers worshipped as God." Remember that Neville decoder ring says when Neville speaks of God, he is actually speaking of your imagination. Not that God is imaginary, but that your imagination and your ability to use your imagination to create makes you the creator, makes you God. So he says that God in you, whenever he uses verses from the New Testament, that like there's a verse about Christ in you, the hope of glory. Now he says Christ in you is your imagination. That is the Christ in you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why he says, "I do not wish to write a book of wonders, but rather to turn man's mind back to the one and only reality that the ancient teachers worshipped as God. All that was said of God was in reality said of man's consciousness. So we may say that according as it is written, he that glorify, let him glory in his own consciousness. No man needs help to direct him in the application of this law of consciousness. I am is the self-definition of the absolute, the root out of which everything grows." I think that's
It's supposed to be gross. It's
in
got a
my
P.
PDF. It's gotta right. I am the vine. What is your answer to the eternal question, who am I? Your answer determines the part you play in the world's drama. Your answer, that is, your concept of self, need not conform to the external reality to which it relates. This great truth is revealed in the statement, "Let the weak say, I am strong."
I like to underline that one because
I really, this is another part of Neville's teaching that I've always, from the very beginning, taught to other people myself, and really wanted to get this teaching in my bones, right? So it's like part of me, and that is remembering that our identity, like I truly believe that everything we experience is directly connected to our identity. And that's the story that we tell about ourselves. And so Neville's saying that here is that your I am, your I am story is what's creating everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everything lines up to that. It's the reason why I'm adamant about, people that will adopt an identity that's connected to a disease. And yes, I realize people have been through diseases and they've fought and they've come through on the other side and they've survived, right? And so that is a major thing. It's something to be celebrated. If you've survived cancer,
oh yeah,
or some horrible thing that tried to kill you, right? I mean, there's something to celebrate there that you've survived it and you've made it. But to go on to be concerned with now nourishing your body, taking care of your body in a way that you will be thriving, and not always connected to the identity of I am a cancer survivor. And I understand the desire to now go forth and help other people that are suffering and maybe donate to causes that do research and all of that. And we can still do all of that without completely being connected to the identity of a particular disease.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
And sometimes when people haven't survived yet, right, and they're still suffering with it, they have a very strong identity with a certain affliction. And so they tell that story. I had a woman once tell me over and over in the very short phone call that we had, I'm a survivor. And she kept saying, well, this and that. And she told me all these things that had happened to her. She really had been through the ringer. I mean, it was unbelievable, some of the things that she had been through, but she was determined that she was going to be okay, which is great. I mean, she wasn't hopeless at all, which is wonderful. But she kept saying to me, "Oh, I'll get through it. I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor." And in a very short phone call, she said it many, many times. And that's when it hit me that if we're so identified with surviving and that's who we are, then pretty soon we will only be attracting more things that we have to survive.
It reminds me. It reminds me of Abraham's emotional guidance scale, because they teach you that, let's say you're at depression, you're at the very bottom of the scale. They say don't go for joy, go for anger, go for a feeling of revenge, and climb up the scale incrementally. And as you get to each level, then move to the next one. Well, if you're sick with something like cancer and you're terrified of what's going to happen and so forth, you're pretty low on that scale. Climbing up to survivor is a huge climb. And that's a wonderful thing. I agree with you. But I also agree with you that you don't need to stop there. You don't have to stop at survivor. You can become a thriver. You can actually go higher on the scale of not just emotions, but of life, and get to the point where your identity becomes even beyond being a survivor. Now you're living life in a thriving, abundant way. That's actually another step up along the same journey.
Right. And I don't think you have to completely let go of if a lot of times in life, when we've been through something hard, it's our inspiration and motivation to do whatever we're doing now. Right. Like one of the reasons why I'm a relationship coach is because of the experience that I had before I was a relationship coach. And that experience was not a good one. And I wanted to learn everything I could and then help other people too, to have better relationships. So, but I don't consistently identify myself with, I was abused. It is a true story. But now I advocate for other people who may be in danger, right? So if I had cancer and I survived it, and now I really wanted to dedicate my life to finding a cure or to helping other people, I would be able to say, well, you know what my great passion is? It's supporting people that are suffering with this disease. And the reason why is because I suffered with it myself at one time, and now I'm well.
Right.
And so instead of it, a lot of it is semantics, but words have power.
Well, I think it's more than semantics. I think it's emotional state. It
is. Well, yes. And that's why I'm saying if we change our words, we change our story. And when our story changes, the emotional state shifts as well, right?
I mean, that's why I was liking, can I find it again? The paragraph. Oh, yeah. Answering the question, who am I? Your answer, and he says that's your conception of self, and that's true. The answer to that question, who am I, is your conception of self. It follows up by saying, need not conform to the external reality to which it relates. And that's what you're talking about. You don't have to relate, you don't have to constantly conform to the external reality of the fact that you were an abuse survivor. You can actually define yourself beyond that. That's not the end. That's the beginning. That's the next step on the journey, so to speak. But it's not the only step.
Right. And, and it doesn't mean that I have to negate the story or say it didn't happen.
It's
or
part of the journey. It's there.
Yeah, it was part of the journey. But it definitely has informed part of who I am today. But I'm not still connected to that identity.
Right.
There's a newer, stronger, higher vibration identity that I can connect to. And so I love Neville's teaching on this. Look what he says here. He says, look back over the good resolutions with which many past New Years are encumbered.
Yeah, right.
He says they lived a little while and then they died. Why? Why do we make those New Year's resolutions?
I have no idea. I wondered that for years.
Right? They lived a little while and then they died. Why? Because they were severed from their root. Assume that you are that which you want to be. Experience in imagination what you would experience in the flesh were you already that which you want to be. Remain faithful to your assumption so that you define yourself as that which you have assumed. things have no life if they're severed from their roots. And our consciousness, our I amness, is the root of all that springs in our world. Really powerful paragraph there, because that is so true, is that there is a place where we need to step into the identity of that person we want to be. So when you're wanting things or opportunities, it's stepping into the identity of the person that has those things or opportunities. If right? And so many times we don't consider ourselves that person. If we're making a New Year's resolution and we want to be, the gym membership is the thing people always talk about, right? Everybody runs out. I mean, it's really funny. It's really funny. If the weather is pretty the first week of the year, it always just cracks me up. I mean, if it's pouring rain or something, you don't see it. But if the weather is nice, January, 2nd and 3rd and 4th, there are runners everywhere. They're everywhere on their bikes running. Everybody's out like, I'm going to do it this year. But I think then they're dragging themselves out to do it, and it's not really who they are yet. And
I see that all the time.
That identity, right?
I go out on one of my nature walks because I just like being out there, and I'll walk. We have one of those rails to trails paths going right near where we live, and so I'll just walk out on that path. That's my favorite place to walk. And I'll see it every single day that I'm out there. Doesn't matter what time of year. It could be January, it could be June. It doesn't make any difference. But, I'll see it. And here comes that runner running toward me. And he or she has that pained look on their face. Like, I got to keep going, got to keep going, got to keep going. And I'm thinking to myself, do you see this nature going on around us? Do you see this beautiful day? Or is the only thing that you see that you got to get the exercise in? Like, come on. Are you really enjoying this? I mean, seriously? That's what I want to say to them. Of course, I don't say that, but still.
So our story about who we are is the thing that informs our experience. Mm-hmm. It creates everything we experience. So this amness, as he says, is important.
Yes.
He says, now here he's going to get into, and we'll use the decoder ring. He says, if you believe not that I am he, you shall die in your sins. That is, if I do not believe that I am already that which I desire to be, then I remain as I am and die in my present concept of self. Remember, Neville talks about sin using the definition of the word that's actually correct in the original language, and that is that you miss the mark. Mm. It's shooting an arrow at a target and missing, and that's sin. And then when you forgive that sin or repair it, you correct it, you take better aim, and you hit the mark the next time.
By the way, I like we talked about that a couple of episodes ago, and I love that because it's the very first time in my life, and I was a churchgoer when I was a kid, very first time in my life where I actually heard a definition of sin that made sense. None of the definitions I ever heard before made any sense. That one makes sense. I just simply missed the mark. Whoa. Dang, of course. Now that I can handle that. I know what to do about it. I know it's about correcting my aim. The other stuff, all it did was weigh me down. That one lifts me up. Right.
And it's correctable.
Yes.
We just change course.
Exactly.
So he says, there's no power outside of the consciousness of man to resurrect and make alive that which man desires to experience. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Isn't that powerful? There's no power outside of our own consciousness.
But there's all the power inside it.
Yeah. That man who is accustomed to call up at will whatever images he pleases will be, by virtue of the power of his imagination, master of his fate. And then he quotes, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And when he talks about this, I am the resurrection and the life, he's talking about the imagination, because that's his definition of Christ in us, or God, the creator, is our imagination. A great, powerful thing.
It's also a
So
great time
that's
to have that decoder ring, because without that, you get back into the traditional church teachings. It's nice to be able to separate and say, oh, no, no, this is what he's actually saying. Let's be clear about this.
yeah, it's important because it can be very confusing if you're not
Hmm.
understanding the way he is defining these things. So that was wrapping up chapter 3, and now we can just keep going if we
Yeah.
want going
Yeah. Well,
into
it's
chapter 4.
the
We may
last
finish the
chapter,
book
isn't it?
today. We may finish it.
It's
Yeah.
possible
I
we
always
might.
say that, and then we
Then
get
we never
into
do, right? But that's our pattern. We do that anyway.
But I love this because the chapter title is "No One to Change But Self."
Good title. Very
And
good title.
it makes me laugh because so many times when, a few years back, I used to be on airplanes a lot, and I would always laugh because I would think, okay, well, whoever's sitting next to me today is probably going to get a coaching session because people would ask me, what do you do? And I would say, I'm a relationship coach. And they would say, oh, great. And they would start asking me questions, and so I thought whoever is my seatmate is like lucky, if they want coaching. But sometimes people will say, when they find out I'm a relationship coach, they will say, oh, you really need to talk to my husband. Or they'll say, you need to talk to my sister. Or, oh boy, if you could just talk to my kid. Right. And I always think that's so funny because this chapter says it in the title. There's no one to change but self.
It's annoying, but it's true, because the fact is we do. Well, it is. It's annoying because we want to be able to change somebody else, right? If I could only change that other person, my life would be so much happier. Isn't that
right?
What we all think inside? Except that it's not true. Because you can change that person all you want to, assuming you actually could, and you still wouldn't be any happier because you're the one who makes yourself happier.
If we could just get everyone to behave the way we want them to behave, just fall in line here. So Neville says he starts with a scripture, and for their sakes I sanctify myself, that they also might be sanctified through the truth. He says the ideal we serve and strive to attain could never be evolved from us were it not potentially involved in our nature. So to me, the decoding that sentence is basically the desire is the confirmation, right? It's like the things that we strive to attain, they can happen. That's why we're striving to attain them. They could never be evolved from us were it not potentially involved in our nature. So the potential is there. He says, it's now my purpose to retell and to emphasize an experience of mine printed by me 2 years ago. I believe these quotations from The Search will help us to understand the operation of the law of consciousness and show us that we have no one to change but self. Once in an idle interval at sea, I meditated on the perfect state and wondered what I would be were I of too pure eyes to behold iniquity, if to me all things were pure, and were I without condemnation. As I became lost in this fiery brooding, I found myself lifted above the dark environment of the senses. So intense was the feeling I felt myself a being of fire dwelling in a body of air. Voices as from a heavenly chorus, with the exaltation of those who had been conquerors in a conflict with death, were singing, "He is risen, he is risen." And intuitively, I knew they meant me.
So is this a lucid dream, do you think? Or, because it sounds like he's actually awake.
Well, he says, it's funny, notice he says in an idle interval at sea. Right. And we know that he was from Barbados, right, and that he would take a steamship to go home. Mm-hmm. But he says, I meditated. And so I don't know if it's an actual if he's experiencing this vision in a meditation, or if he has fallen into a lucid dream state. I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah.
He says, then I seemed to be walking in the night. I soon came upon a scene that might have been the ancient pool of Bethesda, for in this place lay a great multitude of impotent folk, blind, halt, withered, waiting not for the moving of the water, as of tradition, but waiting for me. As I came near, without thought or effort on my part, they were, one after the other, molded as by the magician of the beautiful. Eyes, hands, feet, all missing members were drawn from some invisible reservoir and molded in harmony with that perfection which I felt springing within me. When all were made perfect, the chorus exulted, "It is finished." And then the scene dissolved and I awoke. So saying he awoke makes me think he had fallen into a dream.
It sounds like it, but let's look at his next sentence, and I'm not so sure.
I know this vision was the result of my intense meditation upon the idea of perfection. Well, I will say both of us have spoken of meditating when we've woken up in the night.
True.
So
That's true. Maybe that's what this was.
This too.
Yeah.
For my meditations invariably bring about the union with the state contemplated. I had been so completely absorbed within the idea that for a while I had become what I contemplated. And the high purpose with which I had for that moment identified myself drew the companionship of high things and fashioned the vision in harmony with my inner nature. The ideal with which we are united works by association of ideas to awaken 1,000 moods to create a drama in keeping with the central idea. So he's saying he focused so intently on this idea that it brought about this vision. I think we're safe to call it a vision, whether it was a dream or a lucid dream or just an imagination in meditation. I don't know.
I guess it doesn't really matter which one it was, ultimately. Yeah. The main thing is he experienced it.
And he says, my mystical experiences have convinced me that there is no way to bring about the outer perfection we seek other than by the transformation of ourselves. As soon as we succeed in transforming ourselves, the world will melt magically before our eyes and reshape itself in harmony with that which our transformation affirms.
I like that first sentence in that last paragraph you just read. My mystical experiences have convinced me that there is no way to bring about the outer perfection we seek other than by the transformation of ourselves. And that, I mean, it's restating what he said earlier, but I like the emphasis that this is about working on ourselves. It's like the story that I told yesterday to Alex and Carlos on yesterday afternoon's podcast about how Louise and I wondered why we didn't meet before we did. And then we realized if we'd met even 5 years earlier, we would have run in opposite directions from each other because we needed to work on ourselves. We both needed to keep making ourselves, getting ourselves into a better place so that we'd be ready for the relationship. And so when we did finally meet, we were in that place, and now it would work. It wouldn't have worked before then because we hadn't done the work on ourselves that we needed to do.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, and it's a very powerful paragraph. I love the whole thing. As soon as we succeed in transforming ourselves, the world will melt magically before our eyes and reshape itself in harmony with that which our transformation affirms.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
In the divine economy, nothing is lost. We cannot lose anything save by descent from the sphere where that thing has its natural life. There's no transforming power in death, and whether we are here or there, we fashion the world that surrounds us by the intensity of our imagination and feeling, and we illuminate or darken our lives by the concepts we hold of ourselves. Nothing is more important to us than our conception of ourselves, and especially is this true of our concept of the dimensionally greater one within us.
We illuminate or darken our lives by the concepts we hold of ourselves. Illuminate or darken. It's either one.
Right. And wasn't that what we were just talking about? In the same experience of being a survivor of something.
Right.
Abuse, a disease, whatever. We can have the same experience and choose to either allow it to illuminate us or darken our lives.
That's right.
By the story we tell about it, right? The concept we hold of ourselves.
Yeah.
And I love this
powerful
part. Nothing is more important to us than our conception of ourselves, and especially is this true of our concept of the dimensionally greater one within us. I told you that I've been working on something using Neville's methods.
Mm-hmm.
And this morning, it dawned on me that that I know it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not hoping that will happen, and I'm not wondering if it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. Why do I know? Because I know how this works. Because I've done it before. Because my concept of the dimensionally greater one within me is that it doesn't fail.
Mm-hmm.
It's that if I will assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, that's my part of the job. If I will stay with that and I will focus there and I will continue and stand there, it will come to pass. Those who help.
Before you go on, inevitably there are going to be some people, and probably people in the Facebook group that we're live streaming to as well, who are asking the question in their own heads and wondering if we're going to answer it. Well, then why is it then that if I try to focus on something, it doesn't come true? Why isn't it happening for me? Because according to what you're saying, it's going to happen. Well, why doesn't it happen?
It hasn't happened yet. Because you give up before it happens.
Yes.
Because you stop focusing, because you change your story, because you stop doing the work.
Isn't it interesting how easily we give up?
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
So often, especially when we're first starting to learn this stuff, we give up at the drop of a hat.
But that's what we talked about with the New Year's resolutions.
Yes, same thing.
Why do we give up? Because they're not connected to the root. What's the root?
Right.
The root is me, myself. When I don't see myself as a runner, I'm not going to keep running.
Yep, it's true. Very true.
When I see myself as somebody who's dragging myself to the gym and I'm not really a fitness buff, or I'm not really whatever it is. I mean, you can apply this to anything that you're trying to create. Then it's not rooted. That has to be rooted in ourself, in the concept of who we are. It has to be part of our I am story. And if that's hard for you to say, I am, fill in the blank, because you're saying, but I'm not that yet. Then say I'm in the process of becoming it. Maybe that's an easier entry.
That's a good one. Yeah, no, it's a good idea, because especially if we're early on in our development, our understanding of how to apply this stuff and so forth, we need to have like little steps like that. That's a good little step. I'm in the process. It's like a story Louise tells from my wife Louise. Before we met, was a psychotherapist, a professional psychotherapist, and of course before that she had to go through the training. And when she was going through the training, there was a weekend workshop she went to with one of her gurus, one of her best teachers. And she was loving the training. She was loving the weekend. Everything was so great. And she just had to go up to him at one point and tell him how much she appreciated it. So she went up and said, I just think you're amazing. I think you're wonderful. And I just want to thank you so much. And he says, well, if I'm amazing, what does that make you? And she thought, and she said, I'm amazing in training.
Exactly.
And that's what it is, right? That's how you get there, one step at a time.
Yeah, exactly. I'm in the process. I'm learning to. At one time, I'm a musician, and I remember I was learning guitar, and I was just like saying, oh, I suck at guitar. I really did, right? And one day it hit me. I was like, why is that my story? Like, I will never get any better if that's my story. Mm-hmm. Because see, that was my I am story. Yeah. I'm a terrible guitar player. Mm-hmm. Well, so I changed it. I changed my story to I'm getting better every time I practice. I'm becoming a better guitar player, right? And I didn't stick with guitar, by the way. I used the Sudbury method, and I put it down.
Oh, good.
But when we try things, if I would have stayed with it, I would be a really great guitar player at this point, because it was years ago, right? Mm-hmm. So why didn't it happen? Because I gave up. Yeah. Because I quit. And it's okay. It's okay to quit or give up at something that you've decided isn't a fit for you.
That's a really good point. I mean, because you mentioned Sudbury. For those who don't know what Sudbury is, it's an educational model where the student is in complete control of their own day. And as a result of that, it means that the student is often moving from trying one thing to trying another thing to trying another thing, finding something that really resonates with them. And then once they find something that resonates, then they just go crazy. They're just doing that one thing, which violates the traditional educational model, but it's a really effective way of not only finding what you love, but also learning stuff along the way, because now you're motivated. Yeah, now you're driven because you found this really cool thing, and you're just learning all the stuff that goes along with it, and you're learning stuff that feeds into it. One of the things I love is that in a Sudbury Model School, when they discover something that they love and it needs money, all of a sudden they have this immense desire to learn math, which is like the last thing you ever expect from a kid, right? Kids do not generally want to learn math, but boy, do they want to learn math fast when they found out, oh, I want to get some money to do this thing.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a great thing to remember.
It
and
is.
Also that there's no judgment.
Right.
Right? There's no judgment that you pick something up and you try it and you work at it a little bit and then you decide it's not for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. It's okay to do that.
It's very good. It's not only okay, it's actually required.
Yeah.
Because really, that's how you find your passion. If you can't go through something and say, no, I don't want that, and put it aside, you'll never find your passion. Because you're stuck on, oh no, I have to like this thing. I don't care if I don't like it right now. If I just stick with it, I will eventually like it. It's so nonsensical.
So for that question of why is it not working? Why is it not happening? Probably because you're quitting, and that might be fine, right? Mm-hmm. It because maybe you're not passionate enough about it to stay focused on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe there's something better to shoot for. Maybe the aim needs to be changed, right? Yeah. Okay. So let's see. We've got about 4 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
We've got about 1 page left in this book. You think we can do it?
I've said yes in the past and I've been wrong, so I'd say let's not worry about it. Let's just go as far as we can.
Those who help or hinder us, whether they know it or not, are the servants of that law which shapes outward circumstances in harmony with our inner nature. It is our conception of ourselves which frees or constrains us, though it may use material agencies to achieve its purpose. Because life molds the outer world to reflect the inner arrangement of our minds, there's no way of bringing about the outer perfection we seek other than by the transformation of ourselves. No help cometh from without. The hills to which we lift our eyes are those of an inner range. It is thus to our own consciousness that we must turn to as the only reality, the only foundation on which all phenomena can be explained. We can rely absolutely on the justice of this law to give us only that which is of the nature of ourselves. I hear some Abraham in there.
Very much.
The attempt to change the world before we change our concept of ourselves is to struggle against the nature of things. That's a highlighted passage in my Neville book.
I can understand. Yeah. Well, it's also a highlighted passage in Joel Elston's life, because he totally agrees with that one.
Yeah. There can be no outer change until there's first an inner change. As within, so without. I'm not advocating a philosophical indifference when I suggest that we should imagine ourselves as already that which we want to be, living in a mental atmosphere of greatness, rather than using physical means and arguments to bring about the desired change. Everything we do, unaccompanied by a change of consciousness, is but futile readjustment of surfaces. However we toil or struggle, we can receive no more than our assumptions affirm. To protest against anything which happens to us is to protest against the law of our being and our rulership over our own destiny.
I can see already we're not going to make it. The time just is not quite there. We're close, but it's just not going to happen. So instead, we'll save the last 3 paragraphs and we'll go on to the next thing we're going to do after that with the next episode that we do this afternoon. But in the meantime, I wanted to make sure I got this in, because especially with people in that Facebook group that we're streaming to, I want people to know Cindy Chavez is not only a great life coach, but she's reachable. So I want you to tell people how to reach you.
Yeah, you can reach me online at my website, cindychavez.com, CINDIECHAVEZ. There's a contact form there, or you can email me at cindy@cindychavez.com, or reach out to me on social media, same name on Twitter or Facebook. just reach out and say hello. I'd love to hear from you.
Sounds great. Well, let's continue the conversation this afternoon with the next podcast. Sound good?
Yes, we'll be
All
back.
right. And we hope that you'll join us next time as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.